and welcome to MANSUS 20 Minute Talks. I'm Gemma, your host for this series, where I'll be sharing conversations with the people leading sustainability in manufacturing. Today's guest is Mark Rushton, Senior Product Marketing Manager with aPriori. aPriori is a cloud-based platform used by manufacturers to unlock cost, manufacturability and carbon insights for increased product profitability and sustainability. They help their customers create great products faster by empowering them to do more with every resource that's spent designing and manufacturing. All of this is with a focus to minimise the environmental impact. aPriori provides real-time manufacturing insights into cost, manufacturability and sustainability through manufacturing simulation based on the 3D CAD model. In Mark's role, which he describes as technical marketing, he sits between the customer, marketing, product management and sales. His role is about translating how the market's needs and requirements are met by the different aspects of their platform. We know that sustainability is not local to any one department, that it has to be a collaborative cross-company mission and everyone needs to be facing in the same direction. I start the conversation by asking him to tell us more about his career journey and how his experience helps him to better understand the challenges that manufacturers face when it comes to sustainability.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. That's a good question. So my first introduction to sustainability was really at university, and a module as part of my design degree was industrial product design, was designed for sustainability, and it really stuck with me. It was a lot about the regulations, but also some of the challenges and how different approaches could be taken. So then, leaving university, I did work as a design engineer, did some proper work for the first couple of years of my career. And then I moved into the software side of things. So as I started at a 3D CAD reseller, and then worked at two 3D CAD developers in a kind of customer facing but also product facing role. So as part of those roles, I spoke to hundreds, if not thousands, of different design engineers in different companies around their product development challenges. So I've got a really good view that I think not that many people have had the opportunity to do, because I've gone into really large companies like JCB and Dyson and Rolls-Royce, but also smaller companies that don't have household names. So I've kind of had a really broad view of the market. And in the last 2 years at aPriori, I've spent a lot of time talking with big discrete manufacturers, design engineers, manufacturing engineers, all around their current challenges. So got a really good idea of what's going on in the market. And sustainability has been a real big focus in the last few years, and it's an area that aPriori can help with. But we work really closely with our customers and have a good idea of what their challenges are.
I know that this conversation started because of a blog post that you wrote for aPriori, which was about their 4-phase sustainability maturity model. Can you just go into some detail about that with us and just tell us about the model and just deep dive into it a bit?
Sure. So it's kind of a framework that we've identified from different customer conversations. And when it comes to product sustainability, so it's kind of a bit more mature than corporate sustainability. A lot of companies focus there first to make sure they're compliant. It's usually a finance team or maybe even a marketing team that's really involved in corporate accounting and sustainability. But when it comes to product sustainability, it's because they're in a particular industry or that product sustainability is really important, whether it's the end user or consumer, or different regulations are meaning that OEMs are pushing down to their suppliers that their products need to be more sustainable. So the place people start is really by establishing a baseline. So trying to get a product baseline in terms of sustainability. Now, really all the regulations are based on carbon equivalent emissions at the moment. So that's really what we're looking at. And so life cycle assessment tools are usually what people go to, but they've been around since the late 60s, early 70s. They use a lot of assumptions. So they're not great, but that's the tool that people go to most of all. Now we aPriori can help with that, but establishing that product baseline means that any efforts that you put in to try and improve your product sustainability or reduce the embodied carbon, you've got something to measure it from. You've got that yardstick established. And getting primary data from suppliers is very difficult. Gathering data can take a very long time. So some manufacturers resort to secondary data. And we've partnered with EcoInvent, which is really the leading name of life cycle inventory data. So that's a good kind of second option if you can't get primary data. So yeah, once you've got that baseline, the kind of most logical step is kind of to start at the end. So when it comes to sourcing, it tends to be the first step in the 4-stage maturity model. And really, I think it's because you can make a difference by choosing a more sustainable supplier or working with your supplier to do things in a more sustainable way. Maybe look for one in a more sustainable region, or one that uses more renewable energy, or maybe has access to recycled materials, things like that. And the reason for that is they don't really need to change the design. So you don't need to wait for a particular new product release or a new iteration, new revision of a product. You can start making some changes right from the beginning. So there's not that much impact that can be made, but you're also not making that much in terms of design changes, interrupting production and all that kind of thing. So it's kind of a relatively low risk activity to do. And then the second stage after that, the third stage overall, is kind of taking a value engineering approach around sustainability. So typically some companies will look at a product from purely a cost perspective and look at re-engineering it purely from a cost perspective. But that also applies to sustainability as well. So if you take an existing design, maybe there's a few tweaks that you can make to the design that aren't going to make a huge difference in terms of the actual geometry, the shape of the design. Yeah. But you might be able to change the process. So there's a number of different manufacturing processes where it's not too dissimilar in terms of how you design for that process. So you might be able to cast a design that was machined, maybe with a couple of changes, something like that. Or maybe you could look at a different material instead. So maybe just another material that has a lower embodied carbon in it. Or look at a material that's got higher recycled content, which is going to be lower carbon as a result as well. So looking at it from that perspective, or just optimizing the manufacturing process. So without changing the design too much, you could look at all the steps. Maybe it's being done on a 5-axis CNC machine at the moment, but based on the energy used, you might be able to do it on a 4-axis machine instead, which potentially lower energy usage. You might have a couple more setups to do to achieve the same result. But if the energy consumption's going down, then you can look at, is it taking much longer? Are my overheads going to kind of counter out the savings in terms of the machine energy use? But you can start to play around with the actual process and look at optimizing it. So that's the kind of third stage of the 4. And then the final stage, really the most mature you can be in terms of product sustainability, is designing for sustainability. So having visibility is really the key to that level of sustainability, because you really want design engineers to understand what the impact is of any design changes. So design engineers are responsible for 80% of the product carbon and cost at that phase. So the decisions they make, it's kind of baked into the product. So if you can design and make decisions around carbon footprint, it's going to stay with that product throughout its lifetime. So things like choosing the right material is obviously critical. The designers today are usually more interested in product performance, like how long is it going to last? Is it going to be strong enough? Is it going to be, is the thermal behavior going to be correct for the application? So it's kind of a balancing act, really, and that's why it's the last stage. It's definitely the hardest to do, because it's just an extra set of requirements, along with all the other things, and potentially cost as well to balance. So getting the data and everything ready for a design engineer to make those decisions is why it's at the end in terms of the framework, but it's also the hardest to kind of implement and achieve, because you really need an understanding of what's going into the product in terms of its manufacturing process, because making a wall slightly thicker might make it stronger, and therefore perform better. It might last longer, so that's kind of good from a longevity, and it's not going to go to landfill or need to be recycled too soon. But it also means it might take longer to cool if it's cast or injection molded. So you might have a higher embodied carbon as a result of that. So there's lots of different things you can look at and balance when you're doing true design for sustainability.
Yeah, and data is a really big part of that decision-making process. It sounds like, knowledge is power, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Data is the key to it, and data-driven decision-making is what everyone wants to do. They don't want people to kind of make assumptions. You certainly don't want it to be emotional. You really want the data to drive those decisions to lead to best-in-class products, really. And it's hard to come by. Being able to understand what these different decisions impact is when it comes to manufacturing or in the field, because if you've got a product that moves around, lightweighting is going to be critical as well. Because lighter weight product means it's going to use less energy during its lifetime. So and usually lighter weight products are more expensive to manufacture and potentially more energy intensive to manufacture, because you've got more material to remove, perhaps, or more complicated tooling. So it's really difficult to get the balance right, and getting access to the data in real time is the biggest challenge.
Mark, what advice would you give to manufacturing leaders who are about to start their journey towards sustainability? Where would you encourage them to begin?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think a lot of people can be overwhelmed with how complex sustainability really is, especially if you look beyond environmental and into social and governance. As I mentioned, the in-use phase is kind of going to take care of itself. If we've removed any burning of fossil fuels during the operational phases, and it's an electrified product, it's a lightweight product, then we can really focus on the design and manufacturing phase to reduce the carbon from that. So getting a good data source, if you've got primary data, that's great. But otherwise, if you're using a life cycle inventory for the carbon data, then choose the same one across the board that you're going to use everywhere. But it's, having spoken to lots of different manufacturers, it's really the Wild West out there at the moment. Everyone's got their own way of doing things, and I think the goal of progress is the main thing. So if you can set yourself up with a good process, instill a culture of sustainability throughout the business, if everybody's making small gains, then we're all going to work together and achieve those goals, I think.
Yeah, I agree. We have a saying here at home with the children. We say practice makes progress. We don't say practice makes perfect, because I think it's practice makes progress is what it's about, isn't it? There's no such thing as perfection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think engineers do strive for perfection. Like, we'll over-engineer something to make it super safe, but then it's really expensive. And yeah, I think we want to keep designing. We don't want to stop designing. We can always make it better and better. So I think that's a perfect phrase. I might have to steal that.
Yeah, practice makes progress.
Absolutely.
How can manufacturers make decisions to balance cost and sustainability?
Yeah, so what we've seen is a lot of customers and manufacturers in general are applying an internal carbon price, which converts the carbon emissions from a particular region into a currency. And a lot of companies are doing that publicly. Like Volvo use something like 180 euros per ton of carbon. Volkswagen have got a sliding scale when it comes to theirs, so their carbon price is increasing over time. Currently around 80. I think it's going up by a certain amount by 2030. And it means you can start to look at different regions to manufacture it. So if you've got a very coal heavy region like India, but generally quite cheap to get manufacturing done, you've got that extra cost due to the carbon emissions, due to the energy mix baked in. So it gives you a really strategic platform to make decisions. And if you do increase that internal carbon price, then you can very easily balance the two, because everything's the same units essentially.
Yeah. What are some of the future trends or opportunities in sustainable design and manufacturing that you're excited about?
Yeah, so certainly around the trends, there's a lot of new regulations and things coming in that are forcing people. But there's actually a lot of companies that are going to do it anyway, even if it doesn't apply to them. So that's quite nice, because I think the regulations are going to come too late to be impactful. But I think when it comes to opportunities, I think new business models really hold a lot of potential. We've seen the shift to things as a service in terms of the kind of Netflix model with TV and movies as a service, and music with the likes of Spotify and similar. If we look at products as a service instead, it completely changes the incentive for a manufacturer. If I'm a manufacturer selling washing machines, I don't want that washing machine to last too long. I don't really want to do spare parts and things like that, because then I've got a whole other division and got to keep spare parts going. But if I change that to washing machine as a service, I want it to last as long as possible, and I want spare parts so I can quickly change them and make servicing cheap, because I'm not providing you with a washing machine. I'm providing you with a service of being able to wash your own clothing and things. So, and you can apply that to anything. So lighting as a service, we don't want the light bulb to only last so long. We just want to light the environment that we're in. And so it just completely changes the incentive for manufacturers, and that is a much more sustainable approach. Rather than kind of shortening the life and selling more product, it's actually about making products better and them last longer. So if we can get there, I've seen it happen with in automotive. People have tried to do kind of cars as a service, and Uber's kind of there, and it's kind of on the cusp. I think some people are starting to look at the likes of Uber as a car or getting somewhere as a service. And the fact it's so on demand and quite easy to get, I think that is really the next step for manufacturing. You can really apply it to anything, and it's only going to have a good effect, but it's changing the mindset of the buyer, of the user or the consumer.
It changes the entire consumer relationship, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And in a way, I always hear my parents talk about when they used to buy washing machines and tumble dryers, they'd buy them and they lasted, and these days everything's disposable. So in a way, we're like returning to a consumer relationship that we had before. It's sort of building on that. And yeah, and I think we're going to see, as you say, consumers driving, not just regulation pushing, but consumers pulling manufacturers and encouraging sustainability, because, you know, that buying power goes hand in hand with sustainability now, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be sustainable, you have to be sustainable
Yeah.
as financially as well.
Yes.
So, yeah, the two are really intertwined, and there are a lot of case studies that we've done that both make sense. So, if you use less material, it's more sustainable and it's cheaper. If you make something that's got a shorter cycle time in terms of manufacturing, it uses less energy, it's more sustainable, and it's cheaper. So there's a lot of commonalities and similarities. There are some that are the opposite as well, where a higher carbon material ends up being a higher carbon, higher cost material ends up being lower cost and lower carbon because it cools quicker, or some strange result. But yeah, there's a lot of synergies between the two.
We've come to the end of the episode, Mark, so I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for coming and having this conversation today. It's been great to chat with you. I know that we're going to do a follow-up conversation, which is going to be a Sustainable Horizons episode, where you're going to talk through some case study examples. So anybody that wants to learn more about the work that you're doing and actually what the impact is, that would be a great episode to follow up with. But this has been 20 Minute Talks. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.